Assalamu alaikum. The Kabbalah minna minkum, may Allah accept our prayers from us and our salah and our ibadat and our dua and our adhkar, remembrances of Allah. It's wonderful to be with you all, alhamdulillah. My name is Saffet Catovic. Just a little bit, I don't know if they circulated some sort of bio, just a little bit of background, and then I'm very happy to see some old friends and some older friends. Dr. Izzuddin was known to us in Central Jersey, where I come from, Islamic side of Central Jersey. And the precursor, and I'm going to talk about precursors during my talk, we call in Bosnian preparare terrain, to prepare the terrain. You prepare something in advance. I know people in this masjid are familiar with another term, u'iddu, be prepared. And to merge it into something else with another scouting. I know there's a scouting program here. I really commend the masjid for organizing a scouts program. I was a Muslim scout leader and a scout master of a Muslim Boy Scout troop in Central Jersey Mosque, ISCJ, for 20 years. So it was a wonderful experience, and I really commend the masjid for instilling those timeless values through the scouting program in the young people. But the founder of the scouting program, Lord Baden-Powell, modern scouting program. He was a British general. When he was asked to be prepared for what, he said, be prepared for any old thing. But in Bosnia, we speak about prepare the terrain. So Dr. Izzuddin prepared the terrain for our full-time Islamic school in Central Jersey called Nur al-Iman School. And now it has 600 some odd students. But the precursor school to that, the first attempt, was with Dr. Tariq and Dr. Izzuddin. So it's wonderful to see some really old friends of our family and our community here, and continuing to be part of the dawah and the community and doing the good work. A little bit of background about myself. I was born in New Jersey, lived in New Jersey, married in New Jersey. My wife is Egyptian, from Alexandria, although she came when she was about 10 years old to America. So according to Bosnian, I'm going to give you some Bosnian flavor during my presentation. According to Bosnian, what that means is I am no longer Bosnian. I'm no longer half British, which is my mother's side, Rahmatullah, was British background. My father is from Bosnia. I am Egyptian. Why? Otakles to agenda, otakles ti. Where your woman is from, that's your nationality. So I lost being Bosnian a long time ago when I married someone from Alexandria. And it's a very wise statement, I think. There's a lot of truth to it. Second thing is, like I said, I grew up, I was connected to the Bosnian community in a little way, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my name and that. And but by the way, I want to double check my timing. So what time do you want me to finish by? 9:30? Okay, so I'll try to aim for 9:30, bi'idhnillah, and then we can have some conversation and discussions. And it's a small group, so we can all, inshallah, participate. Went on to get a master's degree, bachelor's degrees, master's degree, involved in student groups on campus, going over some of the old days of Minna. Back in the mid-'80s, I was one of the founding members of Muslim Youth of North America. And we have here the second generation, what we call second generation, the ones who came immediately after us. He was with my brother about 10 years later.
Interesting story. I was thinking like 2 days back. I remember a brother named Sammy. I wonder what he's doing. But then he came here and he looked like him because I used to be friends with Sammy from Minna. And I said, "Are you Sammy's father?" And he said, "No, I'm his brother." And I knew him from
The gray hair, right? The gray hair makes me his father. Listen, I have gray hair. He has less hair. Alhamdulillah, between the two of us, we have both ends covered. Alhamdulillah. No, it's a blessing to see, like, once again, old friends and new friends, and the important work at camping. And I commend once again this community. It's so important to connect with the natural world and Allah's creation. Allah's ayahs are not in the masjid. Allah's ayahs are outside the masjid. 700 verses in the Holy Quran speak about nature and natural phenomena, and you cannot experience it truly. It's called experiential. It is to be understood viscerally. Inna fi khalqi samawati wal ard wa ikhtilafi al-layli wan nahar does not work with electrical lights. It works sitting outside around the fire, reciting that verse and looking up at the heavens. That's when you understand the meaning of that verse. That's how the Sahaba understood it. They understood the natural world in the natural world. I'm not talking about the natural world and we're in an air-conditioned electrical lighting room. You know, didn't understand it that way. They understood it in the natural world. And that's why one of the blessings, may Allah grant successful Hajj to those who went on Hajj, Allah insists that our most important ritual not be done indoors. Everything about the Hajj is outdoors. Yes, they have the haram, they put some construction around it, but there's no dome over the Kaaba. There's no dome in Mina. You know, there's no domes, it's outdoors. Allah wants us to connect to the natural world in the most important journey of a lifetime. 1990s, my father was connected to what was called Mladi Muslimani. Mladi Muslimani, Shabab al-Muslimin in Arabic. It was the Young Muslims organization during the 1940s. It was similar to other Islamic movements within the Muslim world at that time. You have Ikhwan Muslimin, you have Jamaat Islami, and you have others. But it had no direct connection to them. It was indigenous to Bosnia and Herzegovina. And one of my father who graduated from madrasa, who was trained originally as an imam, I'm going to talk about that madrasa tonight. He was in a group with several other people. One of them's name was Ali Izetbegovic. You might have heard of him, the president of modern Bosnia and the founder of Bosnia and Herzegovina. We call him the father of Bosnia and Herzegovina of the modern sense. So 1990s happen. Ali Izetbegovic comes to our house, visits with my father after a long time. They didn't see each other. And says, I need to go around and I need to try to organize the Bosnian community here in the United States. We need to have support for what we're trying to do in Bosnia, which was to establish within Yugoslavia, Bosnia as a central state, to establish some sort of a political Muslim identity. And now is the time to organize politically because we have some freedom. The controls of the communist system were breaking down in all of Eastern Europe and also in the Balkans. We have a chance to reestablish again a Muslim voice politically. And one of the things I always like to say is if you don't speak politically, you don't speak at all. And that's why this is counterintuitive to some within the Muslim community who say we don't need to be involved in politics. It's all about politics. Those who say laysa siyasa fi din and laysa din fi siyasa, they got it wrong. It's all about politics. With the single stroke of a pen, this masjid building can be closed. The fire marshal can come in and say, you know, city council said you can't have 10 or 15 of these wooden beams, you have to have 16, 17. I'm sorry, you no longer meet code. All the crying, the screaming, the dua, the supplication is not going to change that. But if you're in the township meetings, if you're in the zoning board, if you're participating in that, politics at the local level, you can change a lot to protect you, to secure Islam and Muslims, and to secure our future. Muslims have to stop being good at crying after something happens. We cry too much. We have to be there before something happens in a strong way. And if we're not in it, you're never going to win it. So I encourage people who are not involved politically to get involved politically, and there's so many ways to do so. So Ali Izetbegovic understood this. He said, politically, we need to have something to protect, to nourish, to grow, to nurture Muslim community. And that was through the political party known as the SDA party. Went around the United States visiting. 1992, the genocide starts. I leave my job in the city of New York as a budget director. And I go to see what I can do in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I joined the SDA party, which is the party of Ali Izetbegovic, the Muslim party of Bosnia, the main political party. There were some others, but the main political party. And found myself very quickly being appointed to work in the foreign ministry and the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Defense. So I served in various capacities in all those ministries from 1992 until 2001. My main work within Bosnia, or my main position throughout, was always associated with the Bosnian mission to the United Nations, which is in New York. But I was rarely in New York. I was traveling many, many different places, and in Bosnia during various extended periods during the war. So that's sort of a little bit about my background. And when I came back, I said, I want to find ways in which I can explore doing things. And of course, I said 2001 was the year that I ended working in Bosnia. Something else happened in 2001, a little bit later on in the year. And obviously that changed the situation for many of us. So I spent about 10 years dealing with the fallout of 9/11 with different organizations and work that I had been involved in, and returned to my studies where I was working on religion and environment, specifically Islam and the environment. I have a master's thesis in that. Please do look at it, towards an Islamic food ethic. It's at Drew University's library. You can download it. And began to teach Islam courses at the university in terms of the graduate school or the theology school or the Islam portions of the global faith courses, and at the same time serve as Muslim chaplain. And I mentioned today during this khutbah today a lot of the challenges, or I give a hint to some of the challenges that some of our students are facing at the university, having been involved in this position for 10 years in a voluntary capacity. And now I work for Justice for All. We are a human rights organization. Justice for All is tied to Bosnia because its origins are in Bosnia Task Force, which I will also touch on. And what I would ask you to do, because I'm probably going to forget this later, is I will leave this here and I'll actually distribute it to all of you. And I don't want to distribute it now because you'll be focused on the brochure instead of what I'm saying. And then there's a QR code on the back. Take a picture of the QR code and sign up to receive our action alerts. You may have heard the term action alert. It's used by organizations, a wonderful civil rights organization that we have in America that defends our civil rights, CARE. It's also used by other organizations. The origins of action alert, along with the origins of many things which we take for granted now, movements, initiatives within the Muslim community, was in 1990s during the Bosnian situation. That's when we as a community learned to utilize media, to utilize action alerts, and so on. So please do sign up, receive our action alert, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. All right, that's sort of my brief introduction. I'm also blessed to be the father of 5 and grandfather of 5, and that's also very, very important. It's extremely important not to have children. I know there's a hadith which says the Prophet wants to see as many children as possible. So we focus in on having the children part. That's important. But the Prophet said, I want to see in my ummah. In other words, we're not producing children to produce children to be lost to this ummah. Imam Siraj, one of our great Muslim leaders in America, says a masjid has 2 doors, the front door and the back door. And even as we're bringing converts in through the front door, and a lot of converts have come to Islam or reverts as a result of what they've seen happen in Gaza and the resilience of our brothers and sisters there. He said the masjid also is a back door where our own children are leaving. Yes, as a Muslim chaplain at the university, I have to talk to Muslim students who come to me and say, I'm gay, I'm lesbian, how can I fit into this community? That's not an unusual conversation. I'm happy that they still want to fit into the community, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And these are children of presidents of mosques and boards of mosques. So the Prophet wants us to have children, but he wants us to have Muslim children. And part of having Muslim children has to do with, I think, the theme of today's show, a journey through history, culture, and identity. It has to do with history, and it has to do with the future. One of the survivors of Srebrenica, which is the documented place in Bosnia during the 1990s where the International Court of Justice declared genocide had happened. We know genocide happens, but unless it's declared by some sort of an international body, it's not viewed historically as genocide. So in all of Bosnia, we had one area, one town, known as Srebrenica, where genocide was declared, although genocide took place throughout the entire country. One of the survivors of Srebrenica said, what the Serbs are doing now, going back to what Dr. Bean was saying, what the Serbs are doing right now as we speak, is they are trying to control, trying to destroy the past so that they may control the future. They're trying to destroy the past, the history, so that they control the future. How do you fight back against that? How do we fight back against that? By preserving the history. Which history? There's many histories. In fact, they make a joke. History is defined as his story. Who's the his? What about her story? What about their story? History is the one who writes. And the very famous saying, the victor writes history. The one who wins writes the history. That's the narrative that is captured, but that may not be the correct narrative. And in many cases, it's not our narrative. So we need to be sure we have control, have control over the history so that we do have a future. Our entire religion of Islam is based on focusing us on histories. I'm always amazed, and the scholars of Arabic language here know better than I, why the Arabic language in the Quran, when Allah is telling us stories, and we heard stories today in the Jummah khutbahs about previous prophets, why does Allah bring us into the stories in many of these cases by saying, وَإِذْ قَالَ, with قَالَ Musa, and Moses said, is the translation to English. No, قَالَ Musa is Moses said. وَإِذْ قَالَ, why the إِذْ? And one of my late teachers, Imam Al-Fahim Job, used to say, Allah uses the إِذْ. This is an Arabic grammatical tool or technique to bring us into the story. Allah took our individual stories and merged it into a religious history of the world, going back to Adam alayhi salam and finishing with Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam in terms of prophetic history. And so when Allah says إِذْ, Shaykh Imam Rahmatullah Al-Fahim Job used to say, Allah is saying to you in plain language, don't you remember? I'm from Bosnia and New Jersey and Europe. Brothers and sisters here are from different countries. Allah is telling us in the Quran, doesn't matter what country you are, don't you remember what Moses said to Pharaoh? Brings us into the story. You were there. That's your story. That's not the Egyptian story. That's not the Beni Israel story. That's your story and my story. وَإِذْ قَالَ, don't you remember this happened? Like you were there. You're witness to it. And you're witness to the greatest teller of that story, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Telling us that story so we can connect. I was at one of the protests in Staten Island, and I commend our students and adults and those who participated since October in protests. Protest is a form of social mobilization. If you can't walk and raise your voice, you're never going to be able to challenge people in political offices. You need to be able to stand up. Kum fa'andir. What's that about? Rise up and warn. Why can't I sit down and warn? No, you have to rise up. You have to move. How do you move? With your feet. You march. A Jewish friend of mine said, you know, the most important part of Jewish civil rights tradition or practice in America is attached to a rabbi, the name of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with King. And the famous quote they attribute to Rabbi Joshua Heschel, one of the leading rabbis in the American situation, is he said, when they said to him, why don't you go pray in the synagogue? And he was going to meet with Martin Luther King on a Saturday. And he said, I'm going to meet with King and then we're going to march. They said, but what about the synagogue? And he said, I'm going to pray with my feet. So this is attributed to him. I'm going to pray with our feet. So marching is praying with our feet. But I scratched my head and I said, what's Hajj all about? What's Tawaf all about? What's Safa and Marwa all about? What's moving from Mina to Muzdalifah all about? It's praying with your feet. We're the ones who pray with our feet too, in our most sacred practice. We move. And so this idea that you need to move, and I commend those who stand up and protest, but it's a type of social mobilization. And it's very important because it builds relationships with people. But anyway, at one of those protests, and this is sort of my intro, and then I'm going to talk specifically on Bosnian, and this was in Staten Island. Staten Island is a rough neighborhood. Though we have some good communities there, but it's a rough neighborhood. Staten Island is where they have, the mafia, the gangsters, and all sorts of things. And we have alhamdulillah some Muslims there as well. And in Staten Island, did a huge protest. Muslims were there, but many non-Muslims were there as well. But in the case of Staten Island, there was more Muslims than non-Muslims. Usually most of the protests, they're the other way around in the marches. And then Maghrib time came in, and there was a rabbi that was there from Rabbis for a Ceasefire. And very supportive of the Muslim community, the situation in Palestine, and has spoken out about it. And because of this, he has been removed from his synagogue. He's no longer the rabbi of his synagogue, which he was in for many years. So we have to recognize those voices and those people who are sacrificing also for Palestine that are not part of our communities and are in large numbers doing so. If I speak in some of those areas where those Jewish communities are, I say, how many of you have been arrested for standing up for Palestine or protesting in a protest or a sit-in in Trump Tower? Speak to them. Out of the room of 100 people, 40 to 50 will raise their hands. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. How many of you have been arrested for Palestine? They're Jews. We're Muslims. They're Jews. We're Arabs. How many of them have been arrested? They're U.S. citizens. We're U.S. citizens. Philistine is ours. Al-Aqsa is ours. How many? So they're willing to put their bodies on the line. So we have to recognize that. So one of the rabbis was there. Imagine that, being in a rabbi, what do you call it? Kippy or yarmulke with his rabbi shawl in the middle of all these Muslims in Staten Island. And saying, yes, free Palestine, legitimately so. And they began Salatul Maghrib. And there was an African imam who was leading us in Salatul Maghrib, and he was reciting the verses in the Quran, in one of the surahs associated with Sayyidina Musa alayhi salam, with Qala Musa. And Moses says to Pharaoh, and he said to me, I heard the word Pharaoh after the Salah. I said, yes. He said, how can these people be talking about Moses and Pharaoh when the children of Moses are doing this to them in Gaza, when our children of Israel are doing this to you in Gaza? I said, because they don't view you as the true children of Israel. They don't view you as the true followers of Musa. Not you, but the people that are doing this. In fact, the Muslims are inspired in Gaza by Moses' fight against Pharaoh. Even though, technically, Pharaoh belongs to them in a sense, and definitely Musa belongs to Bani Israel. But Allah brings us into the religious history, and He says to you, He says to me, He says to the Sahaba in Mecca, for 13 years, Moses defeated Pharaoh. Quraysh will be defeated. It inspired the Muslim Ummah. It inspired them to be able to succeed. And so it's important to learn about our history, but know that our history is more than our immediate history of our nation and our people. It connects to other people, and it connects to the Ummah of Islam. Therefore, a walk through or a journey through Bosnia and Herzegovina and Islam has to do with Islam. Islam is a critical aspect of the telling of the story. Now I'll give you a little religious flavor of Bosnian Muslim experience. There was a brother that was here earlier today for Salatul Jummah. He owns a restaurant near here. his daughter had married, his son married a Bosnian Bosnian sister. So he was telling me about that they recently visited Bosnia and Herzegovina and about how they experienced Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I'll give you a little taste of the experience of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And this is in response to a verse in the Holy Quran, so I'll respond to you, and then I'll explain to you why I did it. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. وقل الحمد لله الذي لم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك ولم يكن له ولي من الذل وكبره تكبيرا. What do we do with that? Well, in Bosnia, Kabirullah Takbira means say takbir. So when they hear this, the entire Jama'ah, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar walillahil hamd. We should get in the practice of it. Our Imam will tell us it's something we don't do anymore. The Sahaba used to have a takbirah, what I call a takbir throwdown, the first 10 days of Dhul Hijj. They would meet each other in the streets and they would say, Allahu Akbar. They start saying the takbir, and the other one would shout at them louder and say the takbir louder. Of course, the days of Tashriq are the days we were supposed to do it after each salah. But even the days before, the first 10 days, spontaneously on the streets of Medina, Muslims were saying takbirah in the marketplace, in the home, in the masjid, on the way out of the masjid, in the masjid, just spontaneously. And when they heard someone else say takbir, they would say takbir even louder. But this is not something that we do anymore, declaring the greatness of Allah and responding to the verses when we hear them. And that's the style that I said that takbirat was a style that is the style, the voice that Bosnian Muslims use when they make the takbirat. And it's not just reserved for the Eid, they do it at other times during the course of the year. There was an interesting statement that was said to me. It said there are, and this is in the talk within chaplains and interfaith work at the level of theologians. They talk about Islamisms, or Islams in the plural. Immediately the visceral or the gut reaction is to say, no, there's only one Islam. Yes, but there's many manifestations of that one Islam. The flavor of Islam in Morocco is different than the flavor of Islam in Medina. And the flavor of Islam in Medina is different than the flavor of Islam in Yemen. And the flavor of Islam in Yemen is different than the flavor of Islam in Bangladesh. And the list goes on. It's all Islam, but it's different manifestations of it. We don't disagree on the 5 pillars, but the practice is there. Different manifestations. Biryani is not served in Egypt. Does it make Egypt non-Muslims? No. Matluba is not served in Pakistan. Does it make Pakistani non-Muslims? No. I was surprised to find out that Egyptians don't like za'atar. My Palestinian daughter-in-law loves za'atar. They don't eat it. They don't want to touch it. But it's the fuel of the intifada. So these are all different. Food is a manifestation of culture. These are all different manifestations of Islam, and so there's different flavors of it, and we see the richness and diversity of Islam. You can see it in the Eid clothes that people wear, subhanAllah, from many parts of the world. They're all Islamic and yet very different. And that's amazing. And we can only really experience that, I think, here in America. And we should be thankful for that experience. Because if we were back home, where we're back home will be, nobody would dress different than us. On Eid, everyone dresses the same. But here we get to experience the flavors of all. And that's the richness of Islam. Let me start with Bosnia, talking about a couple miracles in Bosnia. And I said this, the first time I said this, I was in the company of a group of some scholars and politicians from Medina University and Qura University in the 1990s in Arabia, Saudi Arabia. And I said in my presentation, because part of my job with the Bosnian mission was to create understanding of what's happening in Bosnia and to talk about its Islamic roots. I said we have two miracles in Bosnia that sort of changes the natural order, natural way of things. First, we have paradise in Bosnia. Paradise in Arabic, Jannah. We have paradise in Bosnia. And they're looking at me, smiling respectfully, but someone is saying, no, Jannah is not in this world. Jannah is the next world. This is not the issue. It's an issue of doctrine. So I just smiled. Actually, in Herzegovina, we're going to talk about Bosnia and Herzegovina. They are one nation, but two administrative units. And historically, it's sort of like the northern United States and the southern United States. They're all part of the United States, but the South is very different than the North. Dialect, language, way of action in the world. It's a different world. The South and the North are different, but they're part of the same America. So the same in Bosnia. We have Bosnia, we have Herzegovina. Herzegovina is where my father was from. In Herzegovina, the name for tomato is paradise. So I wasn't lying when I said, in Bosnia, we have paradise. Of course, they had to wrap their head around that, but it was something. The second miracle in Bosnia, and this is a miracle of the struggle there, especially the struggle of the 1990s, is riba is halal. The sheikh's looking at me. You see his eyes? He didn't say much, but his eyes went in both directions. Oh my God, who do we invite to this masjid? Riba is halal in Bosnia because riba is what we call fish. Semek. So if you go to Bosnia and you ask for riba, you can eat it because it's semek. It is fish. And if you don't ask for riba, you're not going to get any fish, and you're going to miss the wonderful trout that they catch in the mountain streams. So just to lighten the atmosphere, because we're going to get very serious, two items there. Okay. I'll start with a couple of quotes. And I should actually put this on. Because this is going to go with my presentation. I'm so happy. I have one daughter-in-law, married my second son. She's from Egypt. Another daughter-in-law married my oldest son. She's from Palestine. And may Allah count her family amongst the shuhada. Half of her family lives in Gaza. And they were killed about 50 members of her family were killed in the single bombing at the last weekend of October 2023. And the others they're staying in contact with, etc. It's a long story, but blessed to have it. And so I'm wearing this for a reason. The reason is Bosnia and Herzegovina, with its capital, Sarajevo, is the Jerusalem of Europe. It is Al-Quds in Europe. It's the land where civilizations clashed, where empires rose and fell, where genocide happened in Europe's backyard just 30 years ago. Bosnia is a story of resilience against unimaginable odds. What characterizes Quds? Immediately people say Al-Aqsa. This is actually not Al-Aqsa, right? Those of you guys who know, this is not Al-Aqsa. What is this called? Quwwat al-Sukhra, the Dome of the Rock. It's on the same area as Al-Aqsa. It belongs to the Al-Aqsa property. So yes, it's on the Al-Aqsa property, but technically it's a different manifestation. It is a different structure. That's true. But what else is Al-Quds? The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. What else is Al-Quds? It is the presence of three faith communities, religious structures that date back to their origins. The graveyards are the graveyards of the Anbiya, Beni Israel. Many of them were in the graves there in Jerusalem. As they say, there is not a single part of Quds where an angel didn't touch its wing or a prophet didn't make sajda. How is Jerusalem, what Sarajevo the Jerusalem of Bosnia and Jerusalem of Europe? It's the only place in Europe where you have the presence of a mosque, Gazi Husrev Beg Jamia, a Orthodox church, a Catholic church, and a Jewish synagogue within 5-minute walk of each other. Not since yesterday, since 500 years ago. Anyone ever visit any European capitals? Anyone besides me? Italy, France, Germany, go through the list. You will see mosques there in some of those capital cities and some other main cities. But those mosques are 50 years old, 20 years old, 10 years old, maybe you're lucky 70 years old. There is no mosque that's 500 years old that's still standing in Europe. In fact, if you're in the Catholic side of Europe, France and that, there is no Orthodox church that's there. That exists. Only in Sarajevo were they able to maintain, as in Al-Quds, all the religious traditions because, and let's get real, because of the presence and the strength of Muslim control for a long period of time. It was because of that control, that just leadership, and fair and equitable leadership, the leadership that Umar radiallahu anh manifested when he said, take down that mosque because you built it on land that doesn't belong to you. You stole the land. He dismantled the masjid. You took it illegally. You took it wrongfully. And so we have to remember and be cognizant of this. When we speak of the Ummah Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam, we cannot speak of it without Sulh al-Madinah. And Sulh al-Madinah talks about the existence of other communities from Ahlul Kitab, rights and responsibilities as citizens of the Medina city-state. Some of us don't want to talk about this, but it is a reality. It is a reality, and it is something that sets Islam above other faiths. The Coptics are in Egypt. The Christians are in Palestine. And the list goes on. Because Muslim presence does not annihilate other presence. Muslim justice allows for, requires, according to our fiqh, respect, honor, and protection for other communities that live amongst us. We're having problems with Modi in India. It was Islam that gave the problem with Modi in India. Think about that. If it wasn't Islam there as a just religious ruling institution, ruling politic, if it was some other understanding of what Islam could be, we wouldn't have a Hindu problem in India. If we were spread by the sword, there would be no Hindus left in India. Just like Muslims used to be in Sicily and Malta, almost all the population, they no longer exist because someone else was spreading their religion by the sword. It wasn't Muslims. And that's something which we should be proud of. We live in even a Muslim polity, but in a pluralistic society. And Islam is not against a pluralistic society of different faiths and different communities, but one, lakum dinukum waliya din, one in which there is mutual respect. To you yours, to me mine. And just to give a tidbit of that, based upon that phrase, that ayah from the Quran, lakum dinukum waliya din, that Jewish synagogue that I mentioned in Bosnia exists. Because as the Muslims were being exterminated in Spain, also we have to know our history, Al-Andalus, by 1492 by Isabel and Ferdinand, finishing what had begun a couple hundred years earlier. As Muslims were exterminated, biologically liquidated, ethnically cleansed, to use a more modern term. The Jewish community of Spain who lived in peace with the Muslim community, and they mutually enriched each other. They were expelled. So we get exterminated, they get expelled. What happens when they get expelled? The Khalifa of Islam, the Ottoman Khalifa, sends boats to Spain to save them. And where do they end up? In Istanbul and in Sarajevo, in Bosnia. And when they come to Sarajevo in 1492 with nothing but the clothes on their back, the governor of Sarajevo, Gazi Husrev Beg, the founder of Sarajevo. Gazi means he was a warrior, but he was also an administrator. Gazi Husrev Beg, as the appointed governor of Bosnia by the Ottoman Khalifa, someone who was not from Turkey, but was from Bosnia and studied in Turkey. He's Bosnian. Says to the people, what do you need? They said, well, on Saturday we have our Shabbat, we have our Sabbath, but we have no place to pray. It needs to be prayed in the synagogue. He says, okay, build it. He said, this is all we got. He said, no problem. He said, here, there's a space that's owned by these two merchants that I know, businessmen in Sarajevo, very powerful businessmen. He leans on them. He says, you know what? You're not really using that property. I think it's a good idea you sell it to the Jewish community that's there, that has come. They need some land. And I think it's a good idea for you to sell it. They didn't want to say no to the governor of Sarajevo. They sold it. They said, we don't have enough money to buy it. He said, no problem. For my personal account, my personal wealth, here's some money to buy it. No loan, as a gift. We don't have enough money to construct the synagogue. He goes to the scholars in Sarajevo, in Bosnia. We had our ulama, our scholars. He says to them, okay, well, how are we going to resolve this issue? And he was also schooled in the religion. They said, well, you know, we have our sources of income. We have Beitul Mal. He said, good. Use Beitul Mal for this. He said, how? Beitul Mal, zakat, sadaqah is for the Muslims. We hear the same terminology today. For the Muslims. He said, no. We have in our history of Islam many examples in which Beitul Mal and zakat and sadaqah were used, especially sadaqah, for the non-Muslims, to help them out of situations. This is our fiqh. But he said anyway, doesn't Allah say, Lakum dinukum waliya din? Does not Allah say, to you your religion and to me mine? How can I have my religion and my neighbor doesn't have his religion? I disregard, I cross out that ayah of the Quran. He said, remove it. It no longer is valid in Bosnia. They said, you're right. You're right, Governor. You're right. They have a right to theirs, we have a right to ours. In order for me to have fully practiced my religion, they have a right to fully practice theirs. And that's the story and the message of the narrative and the history that they don't want you to know about. It's the history of the Quds. It's the history of Philistine. It's the history of Misr. It's the history of Syria. It's the history of India. It's the history of Bosnia. In Bosnia, Ali Izetbegovic put it, the founding father of Bosnia and leader of, you want to use the term, Haraka Islamiyya in Bosnia, the Islamic movement in Bosnia, said, Bosnia is a complicated country. We're a small country with a big heart. But we have three religions, we have three nations, and there are others. Nationalism and ultranationalism is strong in all three nations. In two of them, meaning not the Bosnian Muslim side, but the Croat Catholic side, the Serbian Orthodox side, in two of those nations, there's a lot of racism, chauvinism, separatism. And now we're supposed to make a state out of all of that with these other colonial empires of Europe, not in Europe, away from us, but in Europe around us because we're in Europe. We're in Europe. They're not traveling to go to the Middle East. We're in Europe, and they're around us, and they're manipulating. My name, Saffet Catovic. First name, middle name. In America, we give middle names. And it's a good hasana. I think it's sunnatul hasana. It's a good hasana. As Umar radiallahu anhu said about uniting the people for Tarawih prayer behind one imam. It's a good hasana. First name, Saffet. History, identity, Islam. Originally, my name, someone says, what's that? Saffet? Saffet. Is that Saffat? Surah to Saffat? I said, no. Saffet originally is Safwat. My name's origin is Safwat. Why don't you call yourself Safwat? Because there is no W in the Bosnian language. There's a V, but not a W. So Safwat would become Safvet. Savet. Very difficult to pronounce. The W dropped out. So Safwat became Saffet. Saffet is a Muslim name in origin, Arabic origin. It is a Muslim name, but it is a Slavanized Muslim name. What's Slavic? In the 800s, 600s to the 900s, Europe was subject to various types of raids, various types of incursions and intrusions. Slavic tribes, different Slavic tribes, came from the Caucasus Mountains. We talk about Dagestan, Chechnya, Karachay. We talk about the various tribes. From those areas, from the steeps of the Caucasus Mountains, various tribes overran the Balkans during various times in various waves. They intermarried with the indigenous people that were there. This is something also that we have to keep in mind when we talk about histories. The Moors of Spain were not Moors. The Moors of Spain were not Moors. The Muslims of India are not Turkolus. The Bosnians are not Turks. What am I saying? When tribes come in overrunning any nation, historically or nowadays, as a general rule, they go back to wherever they came from. After they did their pillaging and their raping and their stealing, they go back to where they came from. But some stay on. Some who stay on intermarry with the local population. They intermarry, become part of the local population, bringing with them their culture, their ideas, their religion, and they intermarry with the local population. So there was a process of what they call Slavanization. It's best represented in the name. My name is Catovic. It's a Slavic name. But it wasn't originally a Slavic name. Originally, my name dates back to when the Ottoman armies came in 1389, my last name, my family name, to Bosnia and Herzegovina. Dates back to that time. That's when the Ottoman armies in Kosovo had what was known as the Battle of Kosovo. Kosovo is in modern day or is contained within modern day Serbia. There's a Battle of Kosovo. It's a very famous battle because the Balkans is the springboard into Europe. So the Balkans, if you want to call, is the front line of Europe as far as those who are coming from the east, and as far as those who are coming from the steeps of the Caucasus Mountains in Russia. It is the bridge, it is the front line, it is the entranceway into the rest of Europe. You go through the Balkans. When the Ottomans came in 1389 to Kosovo, and they had the very famous Battle of Kosovo took place, I'll talk a little bit about that. And by 1492, having taken over, we can use the word liberated. We talk about Fatih al-Mecca, the victory over Mecca, the conquering of Mecca, but actually Islam describes it as an opening. The opening, the liberating, the freeing of people. When they came to that area, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they found a people there. They were Slavic, but they had a very interesting religion. Their religion was called Bogomil. Bogomil is a Slavic word which means God with us, Bog, God, mil, us. God with us, religion. What was this God with us religion? This God with us religion was practiced amongst people, and it had some very interesting beliefs and practices. Because of these beliefs and practices, it was declared as a heretical church by both Constantinople, which still existed at that time. Remember, it wasn't until 1453 that Mehmed Fatih took Constantinople and became Istanbul. And even now, the Orthodox Church International's headquarters is still in Istanbul. The patriarch of the Orthodox Church is still there, protected by the Muslims. And the Catholic Church. They both declared it as a heretical sect. What's heretical sect? Murtad. It was murtad by the Catholic Church. It was murtad by the Orthodox Church. What was the beliefs that made it murtad and practices? First, it said, God, nature, I talked about camping, going outside. The God in the heavens is the God on earth. The one in the Sama is also the God on earth. God is not contained in a building. They didn't have real structures of churches. They used to pray outside in the natural setting. Number two, if God is not in the building, God is in the natural world. Why do you need to speak to somebody down here to talk to someone, to talk to the deity, the God up there? You don't need it. No need for priests. No need for clergy. That's not good for the Catholic Church. Nor is it good for the Orthodox Church. You need to talk to a priest, and the priest has to intercede for you. Now they wiped out that entire management structure of the Orthodox and Catholic churches. You just talk directly to God, and God knows who's special. Another interesting aspect of these Bogomil people belief was they said, stay away from alcohol. Now keep in mind, this is a Christian sect, but they believed no drinking of alcohol. Why? Because alcohol causes your minds to be forgetful of God. Where? Only on Sundays when we do our church activities, our worship? No. During the weekdays, when you also worship God, because they believe that worship of God is two parts. In the church on Sundays, which was an outdoor church without walls, and during the regular work week, working. Your work is an act of worship. Where did we hear that before? So they have this belief system which says it's not by, as the Christians say, many Christians say, by faith alone, but you have to have good deeds. You have to have action. And if you're drunk, you can't plow the fields. And if you're drunk, you can't talk to God. And you can't come to church on Sundays. So none of this, no alcohol. In a religion that says on Sundays you're supposed to eat the host and drink the host. Eat the bread. This is my bread. This is my body. Bread. Eat Jesus. And drink Jesus. This is my blood. I'm sorry to say it in such plain terms, but that's what it is. There is a transfiguration that takes place at the altar. Jesus' blood is in the wine, and Jesus' body is in the bread, and you have to eat and drink it and make Jesus part of you and you part of Jesus. Simple rendition of a complicated theological concept, but it's what it is. My mother was a convert from Christianity. 1, 2, 3. For these reasons, primary reasons, there was others as well, but these primary reasons, both churches declared it as a heretical church. Now here this church is in 1389 in the middle of the mountains of the Balkans. And people are running, refugees are running to this central area. Refugees from the east are running, and refugees from the west are running. And they end up in Bosnia. It's the center area. Because Bosnia is dead center between the Orthodox Church of Constantinople and Rome. Each of those churches is spreading its influence through political powers, that are aligned or under the power or authority of the churches. So the Orthodox Church and its political manifestations moving ever westward. The Catholic Church and its political manifestations moving ever eastward. And when the church moves, both cases, but especially the Catholic Church, it leaves in the areas it has conquered only Catholics. We mentioned Al-Andalus, but it leaves only Catholics. There's not 1% non-Catholics historically in France. It was 100%. They leave. It either convert or die. And people who didn't want to convert, they escaped. Where did they escape to? They escaped to Bosnia. It's in the middle. So these two powers are moving, and the Bogomils are praying to God, praying to Allah, please. And these people are telling them horror stories about mass conversions and slaughters and killings. And they're saying, oh my God, one of those two powers is about to conquer us. 1389, Ottomans come into Kosovo. 1492, they take over all of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And these people who were there, Bogomil people with these characteristics already, looked and they said, uh-oh, what's this superpower going to do to us now? If those two are going to crush us, this one is more powerful than those two, we're doomed. And all those who have escaped to find sanctuary here are doomed. And the Ottomans said, in my plain language, what are you? We're Bogomil. Good for you. Give us some tax, jizya. You don't have to fight in our armies. Don't make trouble. Don't try to do highway robbery. Don't do brigandry. Don't do trouble on the roads. Leave people safe. And do whatever it is you do. You worship what you want. Not our business. Not interested. We're interested in going. We're a military power. Going to the next area. Don't mess up our roads. Don't attack people. Don't cause disruption. Don't be a terrorist. And en masse, all of those people in Bosnia and Herzegovina said, I don't know who you are, don't know what you are, but that flag with the crescent and the star on it, that's my flag. I'm loyal to that flag because of the justice that they saw and experienced in the face of genocide from two sides. And in mass, and this is written in the history books, tens of thousands converted to Islam. They didn't know what Islam was. They only know that that flag was just. Whatever that flag is, we're going to follow it. It's our bayrak. It's our raya. It's our flag. And then the Ottoman Empire, and this is something we should know about dawah. The Ottoman Empire was not into dawah. It was a military empire. But within the military, there were Sufi groups. Sufi tariqas. People belonged to Sufi tariqas. And they began to teach Islam to the people. It wasn't their job. They just did it on their own. So the people learned from those. But it was not an organized effort. There was not pamphlet distribution, etc., like we do these days. And they became Muslim. They became a strong Western front of the Ottoman Empire and a protection for the Muslim world. I'm from Palestine. I'm from Egypt. I'm from Syria. I'm from Algeria. What's the biggest Nakba? For Palestine, we know it's Israel. But what's the biggest Nakbas for our nations? Give you guys a chance to comment. What? In India, what messed you guys up? Before Modi. It was the same guy, I'll give you a hint, that messed up the people in Egypt. No, yeah, Mongols in old history, modern history. Colonial powers. The British we're still trying to escape the British in Egypt. We're still trying to escape the French in Algeria, in Tunisia. The British in India. We fought. It was the Western colonial powers coming in and dominating us. When did they come to our countries in the Muslim world? 1800s, mid-1800s, late 1800s. Sound about right? Were those countries existing before the mid-1800s? Did British and France and England and Germany and Italy exist before the mid-1800s? Of course. They existed. How come they weren't in Cairo? How come they weren't in Algiers? How come they weren't in Morocco? How come they weren't in India? لماذا? We should be questioning people as Muslims. لماذا? They were there, we were here, but they're not here. Until the 1800s. They existed in the 1700s. They existed in the 1400s. 1492, Columbus comes to America. They existed. Why were they not there? They were going to other parts of the world. Answer, somebody must have been keeping them back. From the gates of Vienna, through Bosnia, and parts of Greece, Bosnian Muslims were in the front lines, protecting the Muslim Ummah, though they never were in Al-Aqsa. They never were in Algeria. They never were in Tunisia. They were 400 years giving their lives, 400 years in the trenches to make sure that those colonial empires didn't hit you. When did the British come to Egypt? 1800 something? 1882. What would happen if the British came to Egypt in 1782? What would happen if they came in 1750? Okay, let's say 1707. And they took control in 1707 versus 1882. Where would Egypt be today? There would be no Egypt. There'd be no Algiers. There'd be no Tunisia if they came 100 years before and were able to control. Or 200 years before. Or India. Imagine the British were ruling India for 300 years. Or 400 years. Well, we didn't protect India. We didn't protect India. We protected only the Arab, Northern African Arab countries. Okay. Bottom line was people didn't know, but they knew they were part of the Ummah. And it was their blood. There was no armies coming from Egypt, fighters coming and dying in the trenches of Vienna. There's no graves there marked with people from the Muslim world who died defending the Muslim heartland of Islam for 400 years. It was Muslims in Europe, Bosnian Muslims in particular, that formed the front line, and they were also the front line for the Ottoman Empire as they went into Europe. When that was broken, as the Ottoman Empire began to crumble, and as the attacks incessantly began to continue in the mid-1800s, that's when you see for the first time colonial power's presence in the Muslim heartland, because the front line was broken. And so it's important to know the interconnection of the histories. So Saffet, Abid, Catovic. Who's Abid? Abid is my grandfather. He served in both the Ottoman military and then in the Austrian-Hungarian military, because Austria took over that area in 1878 nominally, but by 1908 annexed it fully. The Ottomans lost the Russo-Turco Wars, and in 1878, Austrian-Hungarian monarchy took over that area. And he served in both militaries. In 1941, my grandfather, living in a small village of Catovics, they have my last name, small village of 250 people, were subjected to genocide that took place during World War II. It was carried out by the ultra-nationalist Serbs. What were they believing in? And when I say Serbs, understand it's an ethnic group, but there is the religious cross of the Orthodox right behind that. What were they doing? Oh, almost done. What were they doing? They were attempting, and very important to understand linkages, attempting to create a great Serbia. That's Israel. The great Israel. I forget the name in India for Modi's version of India. Bharat. A Bharat India. An ethnically, racially pure society and one religion. Mono-religious. They say, mythologically, it existed in history. Not true. Never existed in history. But they want to recreate this. So in pursuit of their great Serbia, Muslims cannot stay there. So my father and his brother happened to be in Sarajevo studying at the madrasa. Main city in World War II was controlled by the Germans, the Nazis, but all his family was in the village. And the Serb ultranationalists began ethnic cleansing. That's when the first time ethnic cleansing was used. Women, children, men. Killed by who? By their neighbors. Killed, being labeled as Turks. They weren't Turks. They were Bosnian people. They were European people, indigenous to that land. His family of 9, only he and his brother survived. All of them others were killed, including his sisters. 175 Catovics out of, in that village, 220 were killed brutally. And this happened throughout all of Bosnia and Herzegovina. They were killed by those who were their neighbors, who believed in an ultranationalist, ethno-religious state that was pure and religiously monolithic. And that repeated itself again in 1992. Fast forward to today. In 1992, how a Muslim community in America got together. We had an organization known as Bosnia Task Force that many of our national organizations and regional shuras were plugged into. First time in our history, 150,000 of us showed up in Washington, D.C. in 1993. Without cell phones, without emails, without social media, just with faxes and phones. Some of you who are old enough to remember, you might have been there. 150,000 of us came out, and others were following us among our neighbors, among non-Muslims and other faiths, as we began to advocate to stop the genocide in Bosnia. In 1995, the war stopped with Dayton Agreement, but Dayton Agreement was an incomplete peace agreement. And unfortunately, the issues that remain are the issues that were not resolved. The issues that remain was that it basically was a freezing of the status of forces on the ground. The areas that the Serbs controlled militarily, they control politically today. The areas that the Bosnian Muslims controlled militarily, they control politically today. The areas that the Croats controlled militarily, they control politically today. And the structure of the government left in place, Dayton Agreement was supposed to be a temporary measure. So it set up a government of 3 peoples, as Ali Izetbegovic said. But each of those 3 sit on the presidency. And so we have a tripart presidency, 3 people, rotating chair. Any single one of those 3 can veto any decision to be taken. So we have frozen status quo. In the process, in the last couple of years, especially, the old ultranationalist mindset has been revived again. Denial of genocide didn't happen. Nothing happened in Bosnia. Erasure of histories, destroying of the gravestones of the Bogomils and the names of villages and towns. Sound familiar, my brothers from Palestine? Sound familiar, my brothers and sisters from India? Ultranationalists changing names, demolishing structures of mosques and communities, been for a long time. Calling you someone who you're not. Who are you not? Who are you? You're a person of that land, of that people, of that history, but no longer. And so the challenge, dear brothers and sisters, we have is to try to be ever vigilant against what's happening in different parts of the world, but knowing a little bit about our history, reminding ourselves and reminding others of it, and the interconnection of all. I'll finish with this because it's time for Salah. After Salah, I'll be here for any questions and answers that you have on a respectful time of the mosque. If you go through the list of names, and I advise you to do so in Gaza, you will see the name Bosniak as a last name. You'll see the name Arnaut. You'll see the name Albani. Where are these names? They're names of your brothers and sisters who in the 1800s, late 1800s, and in the early 1900s, genocides and pogroms were happening in Bosnia as the Ottomans lost control politically over the area, found themselves migrating to the Muslim countries, intermarrying, being part of the population, but also maintaining some distinctive features. The connection of our people by blood, by land, by history, by religion is there, but we need to explore it and share it with others. We need to take wisdom from all those who have tried in various ways to protect the Muslim communities of their homelands, and to try to learn from it, not necessarily copy it. And here in America, we need to be the voices of all of those. Please do sign up to receive the alerts from Justice for All. Like I said, take a picture of the thing and sign up. You're welcome to this brochure, and then we're going to break for Salatul Isha. After Isha, if there's time, we can have some talk, but it's 2 minutes. I don't know if there's anything else. I sort of tried to walk us through the history and that, and hopefully I was able to share something that was relevant to you. Yes?
So communism fell 88, right? So is that what really, it was a Serbian nationalism as soon as that power?
Serbian nationalism has existed since the fall of the Ottomans.
But did that breakage just like spurn that Serbian
Yes.
nationalism, and that's what led to the war?
Shu'uban wa qaba'ila. Allah made you into nations and tribes, but he did it for a purpose, lita'arafu. We don't follow that purpose. So those old nation and ethnic tribes, the Serbians are an ethnic group, began to become resurrected. And so that was the problem. And the irony was that this Great Serbia project was born in the 1800s. Modi's project, born shortly before the independence from Britain. Modi's project was a project that was articulated in the Hindi language. The Serbian ultranationalist project was a project that was articulated in the Serbian language. A Serbian language that existed in the land of Serbia that was ruled by Ottomans for 500 years. They preserved the language. They preserved churches. Were more churches in the 1900s than they were in the 1300s. Serbian churches, when were they built? They were built under Ottoman rule. So the churches and the language was preserved, that they were able to articulate an ultranationalist project. And that project says, those people are evil. Those people are not of us. Those people don't deserve to live here. But it was in the 1800s that a lot of these projects began, and they resurrected themselves after the fall of Yugoslavia. Communist Yugoslavia was a mixed experience for Bosnian Muslims. It preserved Muslim national identity, which I don't have time to go into, but it effectively stripped Islam from it. So Bosnian Muslims, very quickly, if you met them in 1992, as some people went there and they met them, you would say to them, "Are you Muslim?" They would say, "Yes." "Assalamu alaikum." They say, "What? Do you believe in God?" "No." "Do you believe in Muhammad?" "No." "Do you believe in Quran?" "Absolutely not." "Do you drink alcohol?" "You bet I do." "Do you like pork?" "Oh yeah." "Then you can't be a Muslim." "Don't you dare say I'm not a Muslim." It was a national identity. It was an ethnic identity that Yugoslavia put in place because they didn't want to respect the religion. So it made a very strange individual. But in that capital M was a little m. It was a little Muslim, which means the religion of Islam. And it was only needed a chance also to come out. And in 1992, it came out again. Thank you. Jazakallah khairan.